So we had these bannetons up here mostly for, we were trying to make space in some of our crates, but they looked cute, so we left them there. We are in summer, so we're not as busy. We don't use as many of these at a time, but they're good to have around for a busy season. So I'm just sort of clearing space because we pulled these guys out of our garage and started using them here to cool our bread and sort of do our bread display, but as you can see, it kind of gets all over our boxes. They get all crummy. The oven isn't quite ready. Might keep these out here just because they look a little young, so they could use a little more time fermenting. That's like the baker's trick. Every time I'm training somebody new on the oven, I'm telling them to make sure they're observing the dough, because this is like the final point at which you can make any adjustments. So yeah, in the morning there's always this sort of like weird downtime where you're waiting for your ovens to get ready. Usually I fill that by shaping baguettes, but we've trained our staff so well that they're already being shaped. So I'm just using this time to do a bit of house cleaning and get everything in order for the day and for the future week. My life has sort of changed quite a bit. It has gone from baking heavily every day to a lot more administration and, coordination. I wish to be doing a lot more training than I have been able to do, but someone's got to hold the ship up. But there is something like really nice about this. I'm really thankful to have one day of baking. There is sort of like a ritual to the bakery that I felt like for a minute I maybe lost the pulse on, because moving from the garage to Mesa, our Mesa bakery, was a really big transition. And like new equipment, new ovens, new everything, and it went from like a small, cozy, intimate space to like this massive, almost like a warehouse space, and I felt very small in that. And I mean, I could hang. It's just like not the environment that I would say that I thrive in. So right now it's a lot of back and forth as we're sort of figuring things out and getting into the flow of things. The work is still not done yet. There's still a lot of optimization that can happen in this space that hasn't happened yet. I'm gonna wash my hands. So right now I'm just checking my ovens to see where they are. I usually start scoring just a little bit before they're at temp. That way, as soon as they get there, I'm not wasting any time. And just for good measure, I'm always checking the ovens in the morning, sweeping them out. Even if it appears there's nothing to sweep out, there's usually something. And really, like, for me, it's all about the ritual, It's like just nice to be able to do something where your mind relaxes. And I guess it's not just about the relaxing of your mind, but also honoring of, everything that you're doing. So I usually like to start with our French bread. Some tips about this ABS oven are, well, I guess I'll show some resources that we've made. So as we're training, I've found it very helpful to have posted resources everywhere. So this is just a bake sheet of all the loaves that we typically bake in a day, and the top and bottom temperature, steam, bake times. Any edits go on the side. I have to reprint this. But with this oven, it's very recommended to go from low to high. So it's a lot easier to heat up the oven than bring it down to temp, especially the bottom stone. The top element gets to fluctuate a little bit more because of the steam, But that's why I start with our French loaf. That dough is an enriched dough, so it's got a bit of butter, brown sugar. So that one starts at a lower temperature because otherwise the sugar will caramelize on you pretty quickly. So I'm gonna go get that. Alrighty, now we're ready. Okay, so I just sort of build myself a little wall here. And then let's just get set up, and then it's just time to start cranking bread out. So we used to use a lot of bran on these boards, but with us being in a more professional facility, I guess it was one of our concerns was, you know, the mess that would make, and it also causes sometimes a little bit of smoke if somebody's not clearing out the oven properly. But anyway, one of our production manager, Logan, was like, why do you need bran? And I took it as a challenge. So now we're baking no bran, nothing. We're just we've seasoned these boards just by baking on them. If I do get anything a little bit stuck, we use rice flour. Like I said, the logistics piece has really illuminated things that we can and should be improving upon. With the opening of this new location, it's put a little bit of strain on, you know, our current resources. So we're currently hiring majority in Mesa, but we just have a lot of work to do. As far as I was telling John a couple weeks ago, like, this is our moment of a heavy lift. Season's about to begin, and I really don't want to be caught with our pants down, you know? So the reason we chose to open here at Shea is, well, one, the warehouse component was a big piece because we really need that space to store flour, but also it opens up a possibility for doing a lot more creative stuff. So our guy Luis there, he is really awesome. He comes from a culinary background, and we just like want to be able to give him the space to sort of play and create and get back to creativity. I mean, that's why the mill is there. That's sort of John's playground too. But we opened in this area because we've done a few markets around the valley, and you know, we've also during the pandemic did delivery and found that we actually do have a lot of customers that live near this area. We're only, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes from Uptown Market, where that's one of our busier markets. And we started last year knowing that we were moving here at Roadrunner. And just the response that we got from people was so positive. It just told us that we were on the right track to come move to this area. And generally the sales are double here as they are in Mesa. So we see double the customers. So these are our French loaves. These are the ones I was talking about that have a bit of brown sugar in them. I'm scoring them with 3. So the way we differentiate is between these and baguettes, because sometimes people get confused, especially, you know, people who aren't baking but just selling, is with 3 scores instead of 5 scores for the baguette. But generally you want to do odd scores. It just looks better. And the most important things, again, are the angle at which you hold your blade and confidence, really. Oh. So I have only one deck set to this temperature. Each one of these boards has been cut to approximately this stone size, and there's 3 stones in each one, in each oven. And so I know that I have a little bit of wiggle room here, and I'm gonna make use of it so I don't have to delay my bake by a whole nother round. I really like these loaves. They make really awesome like garlic bread. And when you slice these up, and so we've been trying to do a better job with waste. So we'll slice these up and put them over at Main Street Harvest, which is where I've been primarily spending my energy. In the freezer, all sliced up and ready to go for like a little charcuterie board. They make the perfect sandwiches. It's like the perfect size for just a little breakfast. And they toast so nicely. I think it's actually my sister's favorite bread now. It's our French loaf. So I could load these right now. I am choosing not to because I like to sort of give everything a moment before they go in the oven, so they're not going in just so cold. And also, I don't want to be chasing timers all day, so I'd rather just set the timers and then know, oh, now I have 10 minutes to run around. So actually, Brandon just joined our team a week ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's already, yeah, that's awesome. He's already flying solo on our pastry oven. And honestly, like every person that we've added has been such a great help. Like this is a small team here, which is like nice. It's easier to coordinate, easier to manage. There's less moving parts. So we can spend a lot more time getting people up to speed a lot faster. These are our rattan bannetons. So they're made out of like wood, soft wood. And everybody new always wants to turn this over like that. You can do that. I don't love it for the way that it handles the dough. Like oftentimes your dough will be peeking over this, and to do it like straight down, it will kind of smush it, and you don't want to sacrifice the bubbles. But so I actually like to hold it from one end and just tap it out, and then it sort of falls out gradually. One, it's fast, and two, it is, I feel a little more gentle with the dough, even though I'm slamming it on the boards. And we're still doing a bit of rice flour. It's been very interesting to get acquainted with some of this more advanced and standard technology that goes into more commercial settings. Like, for example, we have this makeup air and hood, which is a little bit more robust than the hood that we had. We also, if you recall, had this oven next to that oven, so it was a lot more heat in one area. And I don't know that we ever had the makeup air installed. That's basically, the hood is designed to suck air out and the makeup air brings new air in. And it is definitely, it's changed a little bit of our baking process. Like I've shaved off like 3 minutes from each bake. And another reason that we stepped away from the brand is because this makeup air is right here. So it's like a little fan that blows down right before you load the oven. So when I load this top deck, you might see me get blasted in the face with rice flour. So we tried to minimize that by not having the brand as well. Man, it feels really good to bake again. This is my favorite part. When I found out about scoring and all the pretty cool designs and things you could do, I don't know, I was just like really attracted to it. I took it as a little challenge, and it's sort of what drew me in to join a little more in a like more meaningful way. So I like to do the decorative score before I do the functional score. That's because the skin on my dough is going to be a lot more taut at this stage. If I do the functional score, you'll see sort of the dough relax a bit. And these are relatively young loaves too, so you won't see it as obviously, but if you have like a perfectly fermented loaf or even a slightly over fermented loaf, you'll notice the difference significantly. And the reason that I suspect them to be a bit young is, one, just how they looked in the Banneton. They seem pretty small, like they're not crusting over the top. But also, they feel denser. However, when you do look in here, you sort of get to see all the bubbles and the action happening, all the gases being released. The key to a good wheat stock, I guess, that's what we're calling them, is that most people when they start, they want to start really wide. It's best to keep them narrow, and actually the narrower the better. I'll probably score one with a wider score so you can sort of see the difference. We started our project with Main Street Harvest in 2021. It was a response sort of to the 2020 pandemic and how, strained our global supply chains were, which was crazy to us because we knew our local community at the farmers markets and knew that our local, Arizona had a lot to offer. Phoenix had a lot to offer, and there was no reason for us to be short, in the grocery store shelves on food and staples and whatnot. So we started a little market at the end of 2020, and sort of it just took off. It was a passion project for John and I, to be honest, that we thought wasn't going to happen for 5 or more years after we moved into Mesa. But we had the opportunity to start it a little sooner. And so we jumped on the chance. However, we had a manager in place there that had been with us for a while, but she had a baby and ended up leaving us to go back to the East Coast to raise her son. And we had a manager stepped into place there, but there's a lot to manage. You're managing over 100 local suppliers and vendors, and oftentimes small businesses, so they're not as streamlined, or they're pretty young in their own, I guess, logistics or their own distribution. So it's a lot to coordinate. And by the end of 2022, we noticed that she was, needed a little bit of help. There was just a lot to do, and it's a lot for one person, and we didn't at the time have the team that we needed to sort of take it to the next level. So at the end of last year, John and I sort of had a discussion that I would step over there a little bit and lead that. And we've made tons of progress over there and changed a lot of things. But it's funny how things come full circle, because now that we opened Shea, I was needed a lot more, and my time over there helped me be able to step back in here and, lead in a meaningful way, I feel like. But part of the food service aspect is, repurposing all this amazing local agriculture into, bread is such a perfect vessel for that, So it's our dream to be able to sort of merge the two and make something very cool happen. I have prepared all of my decks, so again, 3 boards per oven. So I should, by the end of this, have 12, can't do math in the morning, 12 boards ready to go. I'm gonna throw these in. Actually, I'm gonna do them last because they take the least amount of time. So I'll start with my sourdough. And this is what I mean with the makeup air. It's gonna blow this all in my face, and it's not fun. So I'm always checking, like, are these loaves moving on my board? Making sure my damper is closed. That's the little thing in the back that keeps the steam inside. And I'm gonna press my steam and listen for it. And then set my timer. And then in every oven, I don't care how nice it is, there's always hot spots. So on this oven, the left side is near to where the steam comes out, so I think things tend to get wetter and therefore they brown faster. That's why I'm loading from right to left, because that's the side that takes a little bit longer. It's minimal, but it's a weird habit that I have because of that. And when you're setting your timer, you want to sort of set it to that metric. So you don't want those to get too dark, somewhere in the middle. Like, you're going to have a gradient naturally, which is great because customers love that. Like, you have your people that are going to love the light loaves, and you have your people that are going to love the dark loaves, my kind of people. So that's something to consider when you're setting your time. I think the thing that I love most about using this oven is how much you can interact with it. Like, you can change the top and bottom settings separately. Whereas in the Pauline oven that we have in Mesa, it's one temperature, which is nice. It creates for a very even bake, but I kind of like to manipulate. And it's more like science experimenty. And, you know, I can stick my hand in the oven and like adjust things, whereas when you're using that big loader belt and have such a deep oven, things can get lost in the back. I don't like that. It's like too far outside of my realm of control, and maybe I'm a controlling person, I don't know, but it is, it's nice to be able to just touch and have this like tactile experience. Okay, and now we're gonna do this. Okay, so this is gonna be a little tricky. These are some of the stickier loaves, so I've got to spend a little extra care on them. So these and baguettes are probably some of the most challenging. It's like the long breads, because you want them to go in, you know, relatively straight. So you have to have a pretty steady hand. I didn't do the best job on that last one, but. So for these, they could probably be a little more evenly spaced. Because you'll notice as these bake, they're gonna get white on the sides where they're a little close together. So I'll try to sort of rearrange them at my midway point when I release the steam. And this is like a new product for us to bake in this oven. I don't think we were doing French loaves back when we had this guy in play. And so it's taken me a minute to sort of perfect the setting. So now that these are all in the oven, I know that I have, let's see, 11 minutes between now and my next oven activity. So I'm going to try to time myself and use those 11 after my 11 minutes, I'm going to have another 10 minutes. So I have 20 minutes basically to reload. So sometimes working in the ovens is sort of like a race against the clock. Right now we are still in our slower season, and it's also a Tuesday, so it's not really like a heavy bake day. So it's not as much of a worry, but I like to think about, like, you know, the grandest scenario and getting ready for that. These are our green olive loaves. Oh, and I don't know if John ever talked about this, but we recently switched from having, so we've had like multiple iterations where we've had like our banetons on boards, we've had our banetons on sheet trays, on racks, and then we moved to some like wire shelving. Now we have used the resources that we have to kind of get the most out of our space. So we've moved to these bread crates. We found that these fit really well, and one of these bread crates is actually equal to one deck of the oven if it's full. So that's been a really nice discovery. It's like I know when I go into the oven, I have a visual like, oh, I just need to pull out 4 at a time, because I know that's gonna have exactly what I need. These don't get rice flours, these green olive loaves, because something about the olives, maybe the extra moisture, gives them a while to get color. So I think they look really nice when they do sort of get that browning color without the rice flour, because the rice flour just keeps them white and, you know, it's not rustic and, you know, bread sexy, I guess. And then for these, we just do a little X score here. But honestly, it's a little bit weird to be baking again. I feel almost like out of my element, and just doing it once a week, it's difficult to feel like you're making a lot of progress. At the beginning, it felt like riding a bicycle again, you know, just a little wobbly. And I've definitely found my groove, but I still feel like I'm working on reading the dough again, if that makes sense. So these bowls are 500 grams, and you can actually probably fit up to 6. 5 is probably optimal, but since I don't have a full board, I'm just gonna go with what I have. Since I don't have a full crate, I'm gonna go with what I have, and I don't have like too little of the next one so that I can combine them. So I'm just keeping them separate. Plus the green olive and the fruit nut have very different flavor profiles, so, you know, I hesitate to mix them anyway. So Brandon, now that you've kind of worked on both ovens, do you have a preference?
I like bread. I like scoring bread.
Yeah, it's fun. You were actually very good at it from the get-go. Have you gotten to score anymore?
No, not yet.
Okay. So I like to change my blade in this cute little WireMonkey lom. Probably, I mean, it's usually when I know I'm gonna do something that is consequential. So these guys have inclusions, and so my blade's gonna have a tendency to drag. Because there's walnuts and cranberries in there. So I'm just gonna switch it so I have the best chance. We put these little magnets on there, so mostly so it can stick on there, but it kind of gives you like a little handle, and that's nice. So you just hold it by the blade. Be careful not to cut yourself, slice yourself, and tighten it. Oop. That's my first one. I'm gonna release the damper and open this guy up. Check on my babies. A little trick is to use the back of your brush to move them around so you don't have to stick your hand in a steamy oven. And then I'm going to reset my timer. And these next two are about to go off, so I'm checking on everything here. They're looking good. They're puffing up really nicely. So for these, I'm gonna sort of readjust them. I'm gonna just come back to them in a minute. Oh, the other thing is not just, so you see the gradient. This is darker than that. And the other thing is you'll have hotter decks than other decks. I don't know why or what makes that happen. But our third deck is probably our hottest. I'm moving them away from the wall because otherwise they will not color as well. Just want to make sure there's good spacing between everything. I'll reset this timer. Because these are darker, I'm putting it for a little less time. That gives me a little more wiggle room on adjustment. And then I will come here and try to sort of move these guys around. So now I can space them out and fix any mistakes that I've made in loading, as long as they're not too bad. So what I'm doing is sort of staggering them so they're not right by each other. So they have a little more hope of browning. And then I think originally I had this to bake for another 15 minutes, but Dave found that 6 to 8 minutes is the kind of the sweet spot, so we're gonna go there. Actually, I'm gonna lower it at 6 just so I can see what happens then. I mean, this is another reason that this oven just, for me, is supreme. It's like I can actually open and adjust midway through the bake, and I'm not just going on faith that the oven's gonna work exactly as I expect. So now I have another about 8 minutes to finish what I'm doing. Had a little detour to go get the rice flour. Truthfully, it's probably one of the things I should have set up in the morning, but I got to doing other projects. We've been running this flow with just me and 2 other guys, but today we have 3. So I wasn't really sure how that changed everything. So we're still figuring it out. On these, I'm doing a little S score. It's kind of a more sultry loaf, that's how I remember that. And then we'll spice it up with a little wheat stock at the end. This is sort of where I break my rule in terms of decorative after the functional, because sometimes you just don't know where your S is going to end up. Sometimes you hit like a walnut or something and messes up your flow. So these are multi-grain, and these have a tendency to get a little bit stickier, so I sort of try to gauge based on glisten. These are going to be probably okay, but I'll just toss a little bit of rice flour in there to help them not stick to the board. And these, instead of being rolled in rice flour, are rolled in, super seed mix. Spread is really nice. Just, I think for me, it's not as much of a health thing as it is like, it's nice to have a bread with the texture, especially if you're going to be using it for something like an avocado toast. It like provides a texture that you feel like it's like a contrast to the squish of the avocado. And for these, we do a little different score. This is a really nice score for anything that's seeded or has some sort of like topping. If there's like poppy seeds or something that has like adds a contrast or texture to the top of your loaf. We just do 2 scores like that. The most important part about doing this score is running from the top to the bottom, but also this overlap here is really important. It's going to create sort of like this shape and how you open it or when it opens. All right, they're ready. I didn't quite make my time, but they came out really beautiful. So this is from the darker side. I'll get the other side out right now too. so you can sort of compare and contrast. Same oven, and sort of see the difference here. In terms of what we want though, I like this, to me, is my favorite. It's got like the perfect dark eyeliner crust. You want the ear to sort of have that dark line, and then it has a beautiful gradient from there. So honestly, the most challenging part of unloading the oven is not just, like, you have to have a certain amount of poise and balance so that they're not slipping off your peel. Because if I turned too fast, they would just slide right off. Okay. Check on these babies. Okay. So they're looking pretty good. Honestly, now that I see them here, they're a little bit ashier than I wish for them to be. I don't know how I'm gonna combat that next time. I'm thinking probably adding a bit more seam next week. But they still have this really nice rustic look. This is a shaping, not error, I won't say error. Some people are into this, but I don't like it. So when you're shaping, always tuck your butts. But really, these are pretty beautiful. They were shaped relatively well, pretty consistent for the most part. I mean, this one, you got a skinny and a fat one. But they appeal to somebody, you know? This is a handmade product, and I think it's important that people remember that. I think that's also kind of the allure and beauty of it. This one is a little bit lighter than I want. I'm gonna leave it in here for just 2 minutes. I used to be really brave and not set a timer, but I've learned too many hard lessons that way. All right, so our fourth deck is giving third deck a run for its money in terms of being the most dramatic today. These are the ones I did not rice flour. Oh, it's also really important to, you know, like, make your life easy. Do it right the first time. You don't have to like load this all crazy and then someone's gonna have to come behind you and organize it. It's like, just do the job once. You don't have to do it twice. So if there's a chance to, you know, take a little extra time to do it the right way, then do it. It's worth it. Knowing your oven is very important. So I unloaded these decks. Well, first, I changed the time on my bakes on these two decks because I knew they were already dark. And I chose to unload this one last because, you know, these are my more dramatic, hotter ovens. So I'm going to unload them second. Sorry, I just noticed that my bottom decks are actually hotter than usual. So they're set to 450, no wonder. We usually bake at 420 at the bottom. So I'm gonna go ahead and change those right now. I should have caught that earlier. So the key on this oven too is this little red dot indicates that your oven's heating up. So you want to, on the top there's less of a consequence. On the bottom though, if your oven is actively heating up, that's when your loaves are likely to burn. So if I notice that my oven is hovering around, you know, 410 instead of 420, and I see that little red dot, I'll just drop it to 410. It doesn't really make that big of a difference. Because I'd rather not burn. for my bottoms. Let's not forget this guy. So I was able to get a little bit more colors, more of a caramel rather than a whiter look. You wouldn't sweep out your ovens after every bake. It's just good practice, better for your air quality, that your brand's not burning all the time. It's also a good double check that you left nothing in here this past weekend. So we've been doing Roman pizza, and this past weekend, somebody had left 3 of the pans in there. 3 of the pans in here, and Dave, our baker that day, turned on the oven to preheat it and didn't open them up right away and found 3 black crisps in there. So that's probably why I got into the habit of sweeping them out first too. It's just to sort of double check that I didn't forget about anything. So we are missing some tools here. Like we used to have sort of like this wire brush that would help us deal with this, where the rice flour or whatever we're using will stick to the bottom. I think this just happens from an over moist oven. So I guess right now we're just gonna have to deal with the char a bit because we don't have that. So this is a great example of what I was talking about with Main Street Harvest, kind of partnering up. So we travel to Flagstaff in the summers because that's where it's cooler, people are traveling, and it's worth it to kind of keep our summer going. Well, while we're up there, when John and I first ran the Flagstaff market, we met a farmer, Farmer Wong, which I think we've actually videoed him picking lobster mushrooms and seeing his farm, but he has like tons of fruit trees. And so we've been getting them at Main Street Harvest, and sometimes he just gives them to us. So he had an abundance of Granny Smith apples, and Luis used his expertise to create these. These are bound to be apple pie danishes. So they're gonna get topped with like a nice icing, but he made that from scratch. So that's a really great way of like repurposing ingredients so that, you know, they're not going bad, because there's only so much we can sell in Mesa. So, but we love those type of collaborations. I mean, just recently, one of the other unknown reasons, less known reasons that we ended up in this space is John came to check this out. I don't know if he was driving by and happened to see that there was space available and found the warehouse. And so as soon as he saw that warehouse space, he was intrigued. This used to be an old dry cleaners. But he walked outside and looked across the street where there's a pretty great local coffee, pressed coffee. And then across from there is actually, so across the street on our block is a climbing gym called Black Rock Climbing. And our oldest daughter, our little cookie baker, is actually also a really great rock climber and boulderer, and it's a bouldering gym that's been around for a minute and has a pretty well-known reputation here. And they actually just celebrated their 7-year anniversary of being open. And so they were coming around to local businesses asking if they had any sort of coupon to give or cards, and you know, John decided to throw down with some chocolate croissants, and so they went over really, really well. So we individually packaged like 300 chocolate croissants with cards in them, and you know, I think for us, like, we really believe in our product, so the integrity of the product speaks for itself. So if we can get everybody to, or anybody to take a taste, it's like, once you know, when you know, you know. Yeah, and so now like we're facing just business challenges, right? Like, what strategy do we want to take now that we have these both locations open? See, it's the challenge of makeup air. I'm sweeping for no reason. You know, like, what strategy do we want to take? Do we want to sort of like streamline and focus in on our best sellers? Do we want to keep that creativity going? Honestly, it's hard to do both. So right now we're just doing a lot of planning, and right now, specifically right now, because October sort of kicks off our busy season, we are focusing on our human resources, sort of sketching out a plan of like what we think we want to do, and hiring accordingly. Because overall, for me, it's really important that this is a good place to work. I think that that's a point of failure for us in the past, and still a place that we're improving. This is hard work, and most people aren't used to it. It's like one thing when you're baking in your garage for yourself, but like to get others to come join your team, and especially with all the economic pressure, it's like we as a business have barely been able to keep up with, rising costs of ingredients, let alone labor. So it's really hard to strike that right balance, because I think historically bakeries, even yeasted bakeries, have like tons of people working, and we've been able to manage what we've managed with a relatively small team footprint, but I think we're at a point that needs to now change so that we can actually, accomplish some refinement. In terms of hiring, what we're really looking for are the things we can't train. Anything that happens in the bakery is like trainable. Like, it's all a function. You learn how to use your hands. Like, as long as you can take direction, and we could teach you anything basically. But what I can't teach is like having a great attitude, being willing to suck at something at first, and then just generally the passion for sourdough, because this really is like a wormhole. When you start to drink from the fountain of sourdough, it's like fire hose. You start to listen to sourdough podcasts about the science of sourdough. You start to like watch video upon video about scoring or shaping, because there's so many ways to do something, and that's the thing that I personally love. Like, I'm not a baker. I hate measuring things. But I'm surprised to have landed here. I guess I am and I'm not surprised, because there is a bit of intuition and magic to sourdough baking that doesn't exist in other forms of baking. If I was making cakes, I don't think I'd be as fulfilled. So yeah, when we're hiring, our applications are live. We are mostly focusing on local applicants, but no experience necessary. Just as long as you have great interpersonal skills, are comfortable working on a team, are comfortable like taking direction, learning new things, and sort of like using critical thinking to further your own development. That's really what we're looking for the most, really. And someone who's organized, because like I said, I was just talking about systems for myself. Like, I developed those. No one was like, do this way. It's like things you just have to do for yourself that you can replicate and help other people learn. Because I think ultimately, like, we're an education space. So if that's your thing, definitely come apply with us.